Leah Mulstein, the international chair of i24, which bills itself as an organization for the political representation of reform and progressive religious Zionist communities in Israel and 14 other countries. She joins us from London. And also with us is Rabbi Uri Pilichowski. He is an educator and political commentator speaking to us from the community of Mitzpeh Yericho. And Rabbi Leah, let me start with you. The Jewish National Fund was created for the purpose of Jewish settlement in the land of Israel. Some say it's time for that also to be in the areas known historically as Judea Samaria or the West Bank. Why oppose it?
So we've always held that the role of the Jewish National Fund is to represent the Zionist consensus. And it's absolutely clear, no matter whether we call it Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, or the occupied territories, I think what we can actually all agree on is that there is no consensus on these areas. And we believe there is important work to be done in the areas where there is consensus, and there is therefore no reason for the Jewish National Fund to cause this controversy, to cause a split in the Zionist consensus, and invest its funds in those areas.
Well, Uri, you have some skin in the game, you could say, because Mitzpeh Yericho is one of those settlement communities that could benefit from a new policy. But you heard what Leah says. Why break a consensus that is held and perhaps create controversy for the JNF?
So I think it's important to look at the actual mission of Calev Ben David, which is not the JNF of America. I think it's important to recognize that its mission has always been, since Theodore Herzl, to buy land in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't determine what happens with that land. So it's not, as you characterize it, trying to buy land in order to settle the land. Its job is to, and its mission is to buy land in Eretz Yisrael. The West Bank, Judea Samaria, as Rabbi Mulstein said, whatever you want to call it, is part of Eretz Yisrael. So it's following its mission of buying it. It has historically been non-political, and until now, and I hope it remains so, it should remain non-political. It doesn't decide what happens with the land. It's not right. It's not left. It's not pro-settlement. It's not anti-settlement. It is simply doing its mission, which is to buy land in Eretz Yisrael.
All right. Well, you're going to have to respond to the claim that buying that land is a non-political act. I'm going to guess you think differently.
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm going to say we need to look at its mission. And actually, in fact, this is part of the reason why we believe this vote shouldn't have taken place. And we're very happy that it's not taking place, because what it actually says is not buying land in Eretz Yisrael, but it says that it's buying land in the state of Israel, in any territory subject to the jurisdiction of the government of Israel. And we have a legal opinion by former Deputy Attorney General, Joshua Schaffman, who says clearly that it is not within the mandate of Keren Kayemet Israel to buy land outside the jurisdiction in territories outside the jurisdiction of the State of Israel, so outside Israel proper, which does not include Judea and Samaria or the West Bank or whatever we want to call it. So actually by expanding, by KKL deciding to expand that mandate, that is a political act. That's an act that even the State of Israel hasn't taken. There was a big debate about annexation last year during still the Trump administration, and the government of the State of Israel decided not to take that step. So why should the Jewish National Fund take that step?
All right, well, that is the question on the table for you, Uri. Why take a step when even government headed by Benjamin Netanyahu, didn't annex some of those areas, which it could have?
It definitely could have. Karen Israel, as Rabbi Mulstein correctly says, is committed to purchasing land under the control of Israel, which is why it's limiting this coming purchase to land in Area C, which according to the Oslo Accords is under the jurisdiction of Israel control. So it fits its mission. It is committed not to buy land in areas A or B, and it's committed to only buy areas from Arabs willing to sell. So my question to Rabbi Mulstein, if I'm permitted to ask, is it's still part of Eretz Yisrael, and why should any Jew not be allowed to purchase land, especially a Jewish organization, in Eretz Yisrael? We can purchase land in New York we're not discriminated against. We can purchase land in Mexico and England. So why shouldn't Jews be allowed to buy land just because they're Jews?
Okay, so that's the question being asked beyond just the legal parameters of it, Leah.
I'm not actually interested in what an individual Jew can do. I'm interested in what the organization, the Jewish National Fund, should do within its mission. I mean, I don't hold any views about whether a Jew should be able to buy land in the West Bank, like a Jew can buy land in Mexico. But just like Keren Kayemet Israel does not buy land in Mexico, I don't believe it should buy land in areas that are not part of the State of Israel proper. And we might say there is some kind of Area C, but we can all agree it is not Israel proper. So what an individual Jew can do, I don't hold any strong views. It's not up to me to decide. But I don't believe an organization which represents world Jewry should act in a way that causes a split amongst Jews. We do not believe that the national institutions, which Keren Kayemet Israel is one of them, should move away into partisan politics. It should remain in the consensus. There is much good work to be done within the State of Israel. We really don't need to start controversy in this respect.
Well, again, the question is being raised, Uri, that there are other groups that do buy land in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, and of course an individual Jew can. You certainly, I presume, bought your home in Mitzpeh Yericho, but why should an organization that is supposed to be consensus, also with donations from liberal and left-wing Jews abroad, take this policy?
Again, it's the mission of the organization is to buy land in Eretz Yisrael. I know Rabbi Molstein is troubled by that, and that's okay, but that's its mission. Before 1948, it bought land over what we now call the Green Line. It bought land in Gush Etzion, and it bought land all over. It even, in fact, bought land in Jordan itself. What's today is Jordan. That's what its mission is, and it's been completely apolitical. This is Avram Duvdevani, who you mentioned before, is the first head of Keren Kayemet Israel, who is not a left-wing member of the Labor Party. And all left-wing labor members never had an issue with buying land in Judea Samaria, the West Bank, never had an issue with it because it is Eretz Yisrael, and Keren Kayemet Israel's mission from Theodore Herzl till today has been apolitically just buying land in Eretz Yisrael. And I think that's the greatest consensus that we can have. It doesn't need to be political. It should be out of politics, which is, I think, why they delayed the vote today, was to take it out of the political realm. For the first time, Keren Kayemet Israel is being dragged into the mud of politics. It shouldn't be there. It should just keep its mission of buying land in Eretz Yisrael.
Lee certainly can answer those points by Uri, but let me just ask you a question. If the vote goes ahead and is approved, this new policy, what do you think would be the impact on the JNF from organizations such as yours? What would be the next step, and more in general?
Well, first of all, it's all very well to talk about 1948, but the memorandum that applies to Keren Kayemet today was only passed in 1953. So what happened before that is neither here nor there. I think if the board will meet and decides to pass the resolution, we will pursue legal steps. We do believe that the legal opinion by Joshua Schaffman is a correct interpretation of the memorandum of Keren Kayemet Israel, and it is therefore not permitted for the directors to decide to just buy land outside of the State of Israel. And we will follow that through in the courts. I think in terms of a PR kind of position, I think it will be a huge setback for Keren Kayemet Israel. Let's be honest, it's not an organization that is held in the highest esteem anymore, especially in Israel. If you look at the Israeli media, it is often portrayed as a corrupt organization, which I don't believe it is, but it doesn't have necessarily a positive reputation. And I think in outside of Israel, people will look at JNF and say, who are you, a private organization or quasi-governmental organization, getting ahead of the state of Israel?
We're going to have to end the discussion there just because of time limitations, but I suspect that this debate is going to continue no matter what is decided by the board, and perhaps we'll have a chance to continue this discussion. Rabbi Leah Molstein and Rabbi Uri Pilichowski, thank you for joining us on I24 News. And that ends